Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Blue Grit Radio. Today, I am joined by a man who probably doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give one anyway. You learn, if you come into this job, if you come into a military career, you learn his name pretty quickly and you learn about his work pretty quickly, and it is crucial work. And so, without further ado, I introduce who I would say most people would put on the Mount Rushmore of police education and the things you need to know pretty quickly and in detail. But Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Eric. Just Dave is good. And Eric, I'm honored to be on board. And congratulations on all the great things you've done.
Thanks so much.
And I don't know so about the Mount Rushmore thing, but we've been under attack. You know, I've been doing this for 26 years. I've been doing this pre 9/11. I saw recruiting problems pre 9/11. Hard to believe how bad it was. They were waiving felonies to get people to be cops. And that was kind of the lesson learned from Rampart scandal, LAPD. We probably shouldn't have hired a cop with a felony record. You know, then 9/11.
We're kind of going back there in some places. So we're seeing headlines.
Yeah. These are hard times. And we're, if you will, mainstream law enforcement is under attack. You know, the defund the police people have been at me and the other primary trainers of law enforcement, 100 miles an hour. We get death threats. You know, you're that bitch that teaching killology to all these murdering cops out there. You know, and we'll talk about dealing with that kind of thing. It really is kind of important because cops get threats every day. They get disrespected and the dynamics of dealing with that's really important. My training has evolved. You know, it's about you know, kind of political judo. You know, you don't meet them head on. You just sidestep them. We talked about Killology Research Group in my book on killing. 500,000 copies sold in English, Marine Corps Commandant's required reading list, and we talk about killology as understanding the factors that enable a restrained killing in our civilization. And you know, the crazy thing to explain. It's not that 1 in a million terrible crime. Somewhere in there, look at that terrible crime in the news today that proves that mankind's a killer. Well, maybe, but that's an outlier. It's 1 in a million. We're a nation of 1/3 of a billion people. And that's 1 1/3 of a billion. You explain to me the 99.99999% of our citizens that didn't kill anybody today. Explain that. Divorce, infidelity, layoff, traffic accidents. There's just this whole host of factors that enable and restrain violence. And we know how they're turned on and we know how they're turned off. My follow-on book was on combat. We've been able to teach a lot about that. But again, going back to kind of verbal judo or political judo, you know, we branded as grossmanontoot.com. People out there that say, well, you shouldn't call cops warriors. Oh, okay. So we sidestep. We talked about those who are walking the hero's path.
Sure.
And you got to be flexible, but you got to stay in the fight. If we quit, they win. You know.
I love that.
I've really admired your work. You talk about relentless optimism, and that's a great term. And we need to do that. We need to understand that. We can talk about that.
Well, yeah. Thank you. It was actually, you know, Abby Ellsworth on her podcast that she tagged me with that, and so I'm trying to accept and receive the compliment you know, too habitually, my own guys included, over the last couple of days. I won't go into detail, but they went above and beyond and exactly as you'd want everyone to perform. And having some conversations with individuals, small groups, they're self-critiquing, right? They're pulling themselves into this guilt factor when the outcome was as good as it could possibly get with an officer shot and bleeding out. I am so adamantly and undeniably, and I can't even say how proud I am, but for them to be in that space and me to encourage, hey, this will take time and I'm not going to argue your perception, but I will say it's bullshit, right? And I will say that you're not being fair to yourself. You would never assign what you're saying to someone else's actions. You would also recognize the heroism and the courage and the service therein. So, you know, I appreciate the nod, and it is so critical, right? We're talking about these times where I'm glad you already talked about some of the scrutiny you've come under, because that was one of the things I kind of wanted to work toward.
Yeah,
But you're
yeah,
like, hey, you're going head on in
yeah,
this conversation. But it's so crazy that we're in this dynamic where you are researching combat, killing, and the physiological and psychological impacts of that, which are so critical because it's a thing that happens, right?
yeah,
Soldiers, police officers, now
yeah,
firefighters literally getting attacked out of nowhere, right? Getting
yeah,
ambushed, getting baited in. Like, we need to understand these dynamics. And nowhere in the conversation was I trained or hearing like, hey, you should do these things. It was, from my recollection, like early on, it was like, hey, you need to be aware of these dynamics because some people want to kill you. And these
mm,
are the things that you can do to help yourself navigate appropriately, control your body response, be
yeah,
resilient, right? Like,
yeah,
and so even to the layperson, it's such a twisted version, but that's the world we're in, which is just trying to polarize everything, which is literally what my platform and my work is about, is trying to bridge that gap and say, no, the majority of us are people. They're humans. We come with our good. We come with a little bad, but most of us are good. And we're going to do the best we can with what we have. So I love that you're recognizing it. I mean, part of me would be like, yeah, why do we need to abandon the warrior word? And because warrior means a lot of things, but people want to twist it into something, even that's something negative. Whereas, like, what is more honorable than protecting those you care about?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, said, the true warrior fights for not because he hates what's in front of him, because he loves what's behind him. And
Mm-hmm.
let's lay a foundation then on this relentless optimism. One of the pillars of resiliency, and I train around the world.
Yeah.
My books are translated 8 different languages. On Killing, on Combat were just translated into Ukrainian. The U.S. Embassy bought 1,000 copies of On Combat to distribute to their troops.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm scheduled in May to go to Ukraine for a week and train their units over there.
Oh, very cool.
So when they when the war began, 2001, Canada was going to Afghanistan. It's the first fighting war that Canada shooting war since Korea. And Canada did everything they could to do it right. And one of them was to bring me in to train their troops. RCMP said, here's a guy you need to listen to. And one regimental commander told me, he said, that first regiment came home. And we said, okay, lads, what worked? And they said, Grossman.
Hmm.
He told us what was going to happen. He told us what to do about it. And after that, we've been training almost the vast, vast majority of those troops, hundreds of U.S. military units, and of course, cops in all 50 states. And the dynamics are the same. But let's cut to the heart of the matter on that relentless optimism. I love that term because the heart of resiliency is to understand that there is only one thing in the universe you can control, and that's how you choose to respond.
Yeah,
We
100%.
talk about resiliency is a term for people who do not get PTSD. Maybe a classic example is Viktor Frankl in a Nazi death camp.
Yeah.
And he said, I realized the only thing in the universe these Nazi bastards couldn't control is how I choose to respond.
Mm-hmm.
And once you recognize that, then you let go of everything else. And I tell people, you don't lose your temper, you give it away.
Yeah.
It's the only thing in the universe you can control. Now, that's easy to say. It ain't so easy to do.
Yeah.
But the first step is understanding the only thing universe you can control is yourself. And if you give way to cynicism or complacency or denial, that's the one thing you can control.
Yeah. I
And you
love
give the
that. I
world a
love that.
victory. We will not give them that victory. So that's the first foundation. Is that relentless? I love that term, relentless optimism. So the only thing I control is how I choose to respond. And I choose to respond with honor, and I choose to respond with love. I've been getting my presentations in recent years. Everybody stands and says the Pledge of Allegiance. I say, what were the last 3 words you just said? Justice for all. Justice for all. Liberty and justice for all. Boom. I tell them, that's why we exist. That's our function in life is justice for all. And that for everybody else, those are words we mumbled as kids. For us, it's a solemn, sacred vow. And I ask people, what's the opposite of evil? And the opposite of evil is love. Evil is absence of love, just as
Mm-hmm.
darkness, absence of light. And I ask people, why do we stay in this fight? Here I am, 67 years old, under attack in all kinds of directions. I retired from the Army 26 years ago. I got a grandson in the Army now. In the blink of an eye, I'll be a great grandfather.
Yeah, yeah.
But why do I stay in the fight? Well, waiting at home for me is my bride of 48, almost 49 years.
Congrats.
She was saying she was my high school sweetheart. She
Mm,
was 15. I was 17 when I proposed to her. We are from Arkansas.
my
And
goodness,
2
yeah.
years later, she married
Yeah.
a crazy Army paratrooper. 24 years in the Army and now 26 years plus doing this. I get home 1 or 2 nights a week, conjugal visit, clean underwear, back on the road. Because you see, the only thing on earth more precious than my bride are our children,
Mhm.
our grandchildren. And like I said, I got grown-up grandchildren now. In the blink of an eye, will be great-grandfather. And we believe if we love our children, if we love our grandchildren, if we love our nation, if we love our God, we'll give 100%, because that's what love means. Love means the worse it gets, the harder you fight. And the only thing you can choose is how you respond. And if you quit, they win. And I won't let them win.
Yeah.
I tell people, fighting with people like us is kind of like wrestling with the pig. Everybody gets dirty, but the pig likes it. You understand? So, so stay in the fight. That's the
That
first.
works
That's
on
the
so
first
many
foundation.
levels, yeah.
And just embrace that reality that I'm in charge of how I respond to what happens. I can give way to despondency and despair, or I can identify the one thing universe I can do and do it, and that's me and how I choose to respond. Everything in the past is done. You've got to let go of the past. It'll eat you alive. The future is uncertain. What some idiot does out there, you can't control that. That's all you can control is yourself. So one of the pillars of resiliency around the planet is faith. And having a faith, having somebody you can turn these things over to. I can't control these things, Lord, but you can. And so, my book's on killing, on combat, the book on spiritual combat, if you want more information on that angle. But having this higher power to hand things over to, that's why faith is one of the pillars of resiliency. If you don't have faith, you still be resilient,
Mhm.
but you're missing one of the components that
Well, you
really,
need
really can help carry
that
us through
that's a
these hard
huge
times.
piece. Yeah, I love that because, there faith, you talk about faith and spirituality and a lot of people get uncomfortable. And I used to
Yeah.
be one of those people, right? And
Mm.
now it's recognition if you take a step back and hit the pause button. You have to have faith in something, right?
Yeah.
Or someone or someone's, right? And maybe that's your family. Maybe that's the concept of love.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the concept of good and evil. And a mentor of mine actually proposed that to me when we were having discussions, and I was like, a lot of my life I was atheist, and then I was kind of agnostic, but then I don't really know. And he asked me how if I believed in good and evil. And I said, of course, right? I was already a police officer, and I said, I've seen both, and that's kind of our job, is to interact with both in the best way we can. And he said, hey, how can you, he's like, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but just to ponder, or you can answer now if you have an answer, but how do you reconcile good and evil without a higher power? And
Yeah.
so I didn't answer right away, and I marinated on it, and years later I'm thinking on it. But with all the adversity we see, all the terrible things that we see in first responder work or the military, it's hard to reconcile processing any of it if there isn't the hope and then the belief, and then you could equate that to faith, that there is a purpose behind all this, that there's a point and there is good worth fighting for.
And I ask people, what makes a great cop? And the answer is love.
Hmm.
Empathy. Empathy is love with the shoes on.
Yep.
That's how we fight evil, is love. You understand? The worse it gets, harder we fight. How would we fight for our children? If you had a child dying of cancer, you abandon your family. Oh, I didn't sign on for his kid. I'm out of here. No, you'd empty the bank account. You start a Kickstarter fund. That's what love means. The worse it gets, harder you fight. And so, what a really great cop, any first responder. They say, what if it was my family trapped in that burning building?
Hmm.
What if it was my father laying there needing CPR? What if it was my 2-year-old kid who's been abducted or abused or assaulted? What if it was my spouse? What if it was my children? And that's empathy is love. And that's the opposite of evil.
Yeah.
And the greatest power of all is say, what if it was my family? What if it was my father or my spouse? And we can do that. We really can. But when we ask ourselves, and I tell all my audiences now, it's not about any specific faith. It's just kind of this existential question
Yeah.
that everybody asks. If there was a loving God, how could he allow these things to happen? And I want to tell you the answer that 99% of the Judeo-Christian ethos would tell you. And most of us don't know that. Look, we are not God's puppets. A loving God would not stand over your shoulder and manipulate every action. A loving Father wouldn't do that. No, He's there and you can pray for Him, but He lets people make their own decisions.
Hmm.
You ever heard if you love something, let it go. If it comes back,
Yeah.
it's yours. That's how
Yep.
much He loves us. And He lets people make their own decisions. And that means a lot of people make bad decisions. You say, God, why don't you do something? He says, I did. I sent you. And
Yep.
there's that foundation of that Judeo-Christian ethos. God's not out there. We've got this idea of it from movies and television of this God manipulate. He is there and He is present and He is moving things in the right direction, but He lets people make their own decision.
Yeah.
And then the other part of that whole equation on how we've got faith wrong is we've all heard, thou shalt not kill. Well, actually, it's you shall not murder. And 99% of the Judeo-Christian ethos for 5,000 years have taught you shall not murder. Almost all the modern translations translate you shall not murder. All the Jewish translations, original commandments, commanded originally in Hebrew, translate shall not murder. For those who have to use deadly force to protect innocent lives, there's never been anything but the highest support for thousands of years of the Judeo-Christian ethos. So just kind of wrap your mind around those two fallacies that we all kind of cling to, and realize that truly the police are honored. And if we have to use deadly force, then if we do it lawfully to protect innocent lives, that 5,000 years of the Judeo-Christian ethos would stand behind you and say that's a right and necessary thing. And I give an example of World War II. In World War II, we killed millions of the enemy, and the world would be a dark and desperate place if we had fought and won in World War II. So did all of our religious leaders, our chaplains, our pastors, our ministers, our priests, our rabbis, did they all preach, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not kill? Then the war began. They said, we changed our mind. Kill those guys. It's cool. No, that's not what happened. 99% have believed the proper word, you shall not murder. And those who use deadly force in defense of innocent lives have got nothing but the highest honor from 99% of this faith-based community. So those are just those two misconceptions that people have. They're kind of existential questions that we can resolve for them up front. And then it's not about a particular faith. If you want more information, you can follow my books, but just understand it's about understanding those fundamentals of the way the world works and the way faith works. And I love what you said is the first foundation of faith is to know there's a difference between good and evil and to be on the side of good. And the opposite of evil is love. And have that compassion, that relentless optimism to say, what if there's a 2-year-old child out there somewhere, just like my child, who needs me. And I'm going to go find that child and I'm going to be there for them. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That breakdown is so impactful because here we are, all the trolls want to put, Lieutenant Colonel on blast for teaching us that killing's good. It's like, no, he's literally saying that empathy is the most important thing. And I love that because it hits close to home where our recruiting campaign, when we revamped it, it's very necessary, full press to recruit police heavily in my last assignment. And oftentimes new recruits and candidates ask, what's the most important thing, right? What's the most important thing you're looking for? And without hesitation, organically, my recruiter and I were like, empathy. Like, you got to care. You got to give a damn.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like
Yes.
100%. Like, they think it's going to be something else. And the public maybe even thinks it's something else. Like, oh, you got to be tough. You got to be,
Oh,
sharp. You
oh,
got to be aware. No, like
no.
those things can be trained, but you really have to care about people. This is the people
Yes.
business.
Yes.
And I love so much about what you said, and even when you're saying it, all these themes connect. We've covered a lot of ground really quickly, but everything kind of comes back to resilience and your locus of control, right? Recognizing what you can own, what you can control, and to not like you can't get bogged down by some of these things at times, but yes, process it, recognize it, and keep moving forward because we do see that so much. And the last few years have been really hard for law enforcement, for you and your team doing what you're doing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if we don't relinquish some of that control, right? If we don't release what we can't, try to finagle, you're
Yes.
gonna adopt this cynicism, and it's a
Yes.
slippery slope from cynicism into victimhood, which a lot of us would hate to acknowledge, but we see it, right? We see it in ourselves, we see it in our peers. When we get so toxic and negative, we're being nothing but that victim mentality person, that is literally the thing that bugs us the most, right?
So important. And, another angle on this, like you said, I'm under attack because, Grossman says you're going to have a good response to using deadly force. Something that the cop attackers are terribly, terribly offended by is that somebody will take a human life and be just fine.
Hmm.
And what do you want? Do you
Yeah.
want them to be destroyed? You want one-shot cops, one-shot soldiers, use them one time and throw them away? The
Yeah.
truth is that people that came back from World War II were stronger for their experience. This is the greatest generation.
Yeah.
And if you could choose how you responded to using deadly force, I think you'd want to feel good about it. The satisfaction of hitting the target and doing your job, the fact that you stopped a deadly force threat, you saved lives, the fact that you saved your own life. There's something called survivor euphoria.
Yeah.
And then there's this
I felt
anybody in
that.
a life and death event
Yeah.
has this backlash from fight or flight to feed and breed and these normal biological responses. Now, there are those who are troubled, and we're there for them. But for those who fully prepared themselves, having to use deadly force is not that big a thing. But here's the heart of the matter. This is really important. I train military worldwide. I train our Predator and Reaper operators. And that Predator operator and that drone
Hmm.
has been ordered to kill that terrorist. And if they do not kill that terrorist, they have failed in their job. But law enforcement, our mission is never to kill. We are always trying to save lives. We are using deadly force because we sincerely believe there is no other option
Hmm.
in the face of immediate threat of life, limb, or grievous bodily harm of self or others. The moment that person is no longer a threat, their life is precious as any other life on the planet. I love to give the example of the Hollywood bank robbery shootout. A long time ago, maybe the first major law enforcement shootout ever on national live TV.
Yeah.
Two rifle-armed, body armor bank robbers. LAPD's got them kind of pinned down, and there's this horrendous gunfight. Body armor and rifles and bank robbers, and the bank robbers are down. And the world watched as LAPD jumped on them, stripped off their body armor, and applied CPR and tried to save their lives. Oh, those bank robbers are trying to kill those cops.
Hmm.
Now the cops are trying to save their life. That's right.
Yeah.
We're always trying to save lives. And to the very best of our human ability, the moment you're no longer a threat, your life is precious as any other life on the planet. And that's the critical thing about law enforcement that we can never lose track of. We're always trying to save lives.
Yeah.
That brings us back to empathy and love. And, I've had a lot of presentations in prisons and corrections. And it's amazing how many people in that environment say, I love my job. Oh, you're a lieutenant, a sergeant in the prison, a warden, a captain. I said, well, why do you feel like that? He says, I've been able to teach an awful lot of people that one bad decision does not have to define their lives.
Hmm.
Nobody on the planet does a better job of trying to give those who are incarcerated a chance to walk out the door and be a better person. And so across the board, everything we have, we should be proud of. But here's the core of the problem. There's this religious faith that the world breaks up into the oppressors and the oppressed. And the oppressors are always the bad guys, and the oppressed are always the good guys. And that means that the cops are the oppressors, and the criminals are the oppressed. When we see these crazy DAs, when we see this goofy stuff, we said, where does that come from?
Hmm.
It comes from this twisted belief that cops are the oppressors, and that you're oppressing these people by enforcing the law. And woe unto you when you say good is evil and evil is good, because that's what's happening. And here we are believing in good and evil, and that turn around saying, you're not good, you're evil, you're oppressing these people. No, we're not. Nobody on the planet gives the incarcerated a better opportunity to walk out and be a better person. Nobody on the planet uses deadly force with more caution, and our desire is always to save lives, and we should never let go of that. It drives who we are, and what we do, and it comes back to empathy and love. Even that killer, he drops the gun, is no longer a threat. It's just another human being who needs my help,
Yeah.
and that's a beautiful and powerful thing.
Yeah. That's such a huge thing. And as much as the last few years have been just tumultuous, like devastating to I would say the profession, but truly the nation suffered, right? And beyond the nation, right? Western culture, police agencies everywhere, internationally suffered. But, in that, maybe in that desire to get back to that optimism is, hey, there are opportunities, right? There is accountability, and the vast, vast, vast majority of cops are exactly as you described. And if there is one that's not, we want to suss them out. We want to find them. But
Yes.
if anything,
Yep.
I think it's worthwhile just to, paint that picture where, yes, cops don't want to shoot someone, but sometimes they have to, and it would be irresponsible not to. However, I've seen numerous times, myself included, right? I've been in an officer involved shooting, and I've also been in a situation that categorically would have been extremely justified and legal for me to shoot. Now, I had hesitation. I had hesitation because I saw how that played out if I didn't have to. And in that fraction of a second, I recognized another officer was closer and probably had a better angle because I was in the dark. It was, nighttime. And I just trusted a little, again, it was that release, right? I
Yeah.
trusted the moment and I trusted that other officer. And it turned out that he saw, what was reaching. This guy was trying to goad us into an officer fall shooting, and he didn't want to go to jail. He wasn't armed in the end, but he saw what in his intuition and what he perceived was like, he doesn't have a gun. I don't have enough to believe it's a gun. He's
Mm.
reaching his pocket for something, and he comes out, and fortunately, it wasn't a gun.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
lost so much more sleep over that
Yeah.
that that notion that, man, I could have shot and maybe I should have, rather than the actual shooting that I'd been in, years prior. And so if that's not a testament to, a lot of people are like, "Oh, Eric, you're different." I'm like, no, no, no. I'm one of many. I'm just
Yeah.
someone that's willing to put a voice to it, and that's a
Yes.
lot of what this is about.
And I believe with good solid evidence that I have interviewed more people who are killed than anybody in human history. I've interviewed more people who have been in combat than anybody in human history. All my research before I retired from my book on killing, then on the road a couple hundred days a year for 26 years, and every day somebody comes up and gives me a case study, an example, and one more piece of the puzzle. And it is amazing. I talk about it in On Killing. It is amazing how many people are more troubled by the time when they didn't pull the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
They've made the decision, they're taking out the slack, and all of a sudden they don't have to. And there's this weird biological dynamic that appears to take place, and people are troubled by that. But there is great peace in knowing that that's normal.
Yeah.
Psychologists call that normalizing,
Yeah.
and that's too trivial a term for something so powerful. To just know that, most people are troubled by that. It's not unusual. There's some kind of a weird biology going on in there. You're ramped up for it. You're ready to go. I think about the puppy inside, the autonomic nervous system, fight or flight, feed and breed, things we don't consciously control. And what have you had? You've been a canine officer.
Mm-hmm.
You've had a good dog who wants a bite. He's ready to bite, and he's pulled back. I
Yeah.
can't bite. I think
Yeah.
that's a puppy inside saying, "Wait a minute, wait a minute. That was a good bite."
Yeah.
But we're in charge
He's
of the
trying to
puppy.
protect, and he's trying to do what he was,
Yeah,
trained to
yeah,
do. And
yeah,
then it starts with play, right? For those that don't know dog work, yeah, it starts with play and playing off that prey drive, right? It's a hide and seek, it's a tug of war. But then they key in that this isn't a game, and this person has just tried to hurt me. This person has just tried to hurt dad, and that's the thing. And it keys in on their biology. And some people think that's so cruel, but it's like, we put, not to make a side note, because there's really not going to be too many objectors listening to this conversation, but
yeah.
but it's literally training this partner, this team member that you love, that you're putting into harm's way day after day. And maybe for a total stranger, maybe this person is going to take a bullet instead of, someone that's out there hurting people, unfortunately. But that's the thing, and that's the purpose. But yeah, sorry, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Oh, that's good. That's powerful. And and you mentioned a point about somebody you don't even know. Jesus said, "Greater love has no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends." So, what manner of love is this, that men and women will die for strangers? What manner of love is this, that men and women will walk out the door and lay their life down for people they never even met, put their lives on the line every single day?
Yep.
And I tell people, people, they want to be cops because they like to boss people around. It's the stupidest thing you could ever say. Cops take more garbage, more people waving the finger at them, more disrespect. No, they're not doing this job for the money. Although in the years to come, you will see law enforcement making a whole lot more money. And that's worth talking about. But they're not doing it to get rich. And they're not doing it to be famous celebrities. They're doing it because they truly want to use their life to make the world just a little bit better place.
Yeah.
And the average cop does more good in a week than a lot of people do in a lifetime. Being there for people in their hour of greatest need, protecting the weak. It's a fundamental belief that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. It's just a foundation we can all agree on.
Yeah.
That the strong have this obligation to protect the weak. And that comes back to empathy, and that comes back to love with the shoes on. And the opposite of evil is love. How do we fight evil? With love. As we love our way of life, as we love our nation, as we love our family, we walk out that door and give 100%. But here's kind of a key dynamic. The wheels have really come off the bus. There's never been a time this bad. Medical technology is holding down the murder rate. The number of dead people misrepresents the situation, and we really got to get beyond that. I was invited to the White House as part of the president's roundtable on violent video games, had a chance to put one book in the president's hand. I gave him a copy of my book, Assassination, invited back to the White House to brief the vice president, and once again, put one book in his hand. This is a book, but I told the vice president, just like we have inflation-adjusted dollars, we need medically adjusted murders. And when we do that, it will transform the way we see the situation. Because they're taking credit for the murder rate going down or not quite as bad as it was without allowing. Imagine somebody said, your grandpa made 25 cents an hour. You make $25 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You're 100 times better off than your grandpa. But we all know about inflation. Yeah. We all know. But when somebody says, well, the murder rate is this, but it's not quite as bad as in, your BS meter should be going off.
Not the full context, right?
Yes. So here's the key. Last year was the all-time record number of cops shot in the line of duty, as far back as FOP's keeping data. Now, I've looked all the way through history, and the most number of cops murdered was in the 1920s during Prohibition. Now, no antibiotics, no body armor, no ambulance, no 911 system. If we try to compare the number of dead cops with the 1920s, it completely breaks down. Now, the next batch of dead cops was the late 60s, early 70s. And that was, once again, the war riots and the race riots. And we see a record number of cops killed. But again, no body armor, no 911 systems, and, no tourniquets. It's amazing. Well, the next batch of murdered cops, not quite as bad as those other two, but if we allow for body armor and medical technology, this is an all-time record number of cops murdered in the line of duty. And it is an all-time record number of cops shot in the line of duty, in spite of everything we're doing. Yeah, it's bad. 2020, starting in May of 2020, homicide rates, year-over-year increase in homicides up 30%. We'd never seen more than a 12.5% annual increase in homicides. 2020, it went up 30%. It began in May of 2020. What happened in May of 2020? The George Floyd incident. And the twisted, distorted media misrepresentation says the cops are the oppressors and the criminals are the oppressed, is in many ways declared a war on cops. And there's some great books out there about that. Blue Lies, one of the best ones, another one called War on Cops by a very smart lady. But these are, don't try to sugarcoat it, accept it head on. These are bad times. But it's the worst of times, it's the best of times. Because your compassion and your courage and your competence shine bright for the darkness of the hour. And every bad thing that happens is an opportunity to be there for them in the hour of greatest need. And they will never forget. They will never forget when you were there for them in that hour of greatest need. And you got to believe in good. And you got to believe in that fundamental law. It is the responsibility of the strong to protect the weak and to be there for them at the hour of greatest need. I tell them, there's one other time in history kind of like this. It was the winter of 1776. George Washington's army was a volunteer army. And when the winter of 1776 came out, they just melted. You've heard about bloody footprints in the snow of Valley Forge. It's real. Yeah. And Thomas Paine wrote these words. He said, these are the times that try men's souls. Stop. Your soul's on trial. You're being judged. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot was shrink from the responsibility. Are we summer soldiers? Are we sunshine patriots? Things get bad and we quit? No.
Exactly.
No. And he said, we have this consolation. Here's the big payoff. The more difficult the battle, the more glorious the victory. The violence of the Old West is a stinking Hollywood myth. The gunfight at the OK Corral wouldn't make the state news today. Off the top of my head, I'll introduce you to 20 cops, so one more gunfights Wyatt Earp ever dreamed of. Your grandchildren will talk about you like we talk about Wyatt Earp with Duke Cosner. Now, here's the key. Here's the heart of it all. We are a wealthy nation. When things are wrong, we throw money at it. That's how we won World War II. And how did we win the Cold War? We outspent them. What we do during the pandemic, we threw trillions of dollars into it. When things are wrong, and when people begin to understand how bad it is, we'll start throwing money at the problem. And cops will get paid what they deserve to be paid. The person who decides whether or not to shoot your kid should be the best trained, best paid, best qualified person on the planet. And that's coming. When people begin to realize how desperately bad it is, we've got to let people know. We've got to sound off from the leadership positions. The murder rate misrepresents the situation. It's much, much worse. There's a record number of cops murdered in spite of body armor technology, a record number of cops shot in the line of duty. And we've got to start throwing money at the problem. And the foundation of every civilization is public safety. Everything else is secondary. And I call this Grossman's law. We know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the foundation, but here's the social contract. The Pharaoh, the Romans, us. Here's the social contract. Here's the deal. You obey the law, you pay your taxes, and we'll help keep you safe. Now, if we can't keep them safe, why would they obey the law?
Mm-hmm.
Why would they pay their taxes? So last year, the UCR, Uniform Crime Report, and departments reporting to the FBI, had crime went down just a little bit last year. It went up, year after year, tiny bit down. But we've got the victim survey. We got a crime victim survey. And the crime victim survey says crime is way up. This is one of the greatest disparities between the crimes reported by law enforcement and, if you will, the crimes reported in the survey by our citizens.
Yeah.
And what that means is there's whole parts of our cities not being policed. They're not reporting it. Why would they report? You see, the social contract is completely broken down in these cities. The cops don't go to that. We know how to not get killed. We know how to not get ambushed, assassinated. We know how to stay alive. We don't go to that part of the city. Cops across America tell me we just don't go to that part
you
of the
don't
city.
have enough. Yeah. And so we've seen that regionally, and we're not even at the worst spot. Like, our cops are decently paid compared to most of the nation. And so it's all to say, like, if you want to learn about this, like, let's not conflate numbers or just pull these random stats, right? Because there's damn lies and statistics, right? And like they easily manipulatable. And I'm not a big numbers guy, but all it takes is you go to a community meeting, or you just go to the community and you ask, hey, has something been really shady, or has a crime occurred to you or someone you know, and did you report it? And frequently it's no. Or, I didn't want to bug you because it's so violent out there. I don't want to trouble you with my broken window or my trouble, like my stolen mail. I don't want to burden you. Like, that's not the goal, right? And so every cop around the nation will basically chime in. I have followers from all over that will say from their own perspective and their own place. If I post something like, hey, look at this article about crime rates down, they're like, yeah, because people aren't reporting. They know it, right? They know it, they live it, and they interact with it. Yeah.
It's bad. It's crazy bad, Eric. And our fundamental mission, the mechanism to make it better, is to get the truth out, to let people know that the UCR is misrepresenting the situation, let people know medical technology is holding down the murder rate. It's much worse than it looks. Let people know record number of cops murdered in the line of duty. What we call the Ferguson effect was the explosion of violence in 2015 and 16, and 5 dead cops in Dallas and 4 dead cops in Baton Rouge. And the media began to realize that we're creating a problem. And then we had the George Floyd effect. I show a page from the New York Times that shows that 2020 is unlike anything we've ever seen before. But then the New York Times just buried the story because it points a finger right back at them. And this twisted reporting that the cops are the oppressors and the criminals are the oppressed. and you kill the oppressor, you attack the oppressor, you defend the oppressed. This twisted misrepresentation, the New York Times reported that, and then they buried it on page 6 of a Sunday supplement and never mentioned it again. We've got to get the word out because they are invested in misrepresenting the situation. And we've got to understand that we got to start throwing money at this problem. It's coming apart. The citizens don't report the broken, the ones that like us, they don't report the minor crimes. The
Yeah,
ones that don't like us, they don't report any crimes.
exactly.
So homicides go unreported, missing children go unreported. Whole portions of our civilization no longer have justice. They no longer have law enforcement. The social contract is broken down, and we don't even know it. And so we got to get that word out. We'll start throwing money at that problem and start paying cops and training cops the way they deserve to. And it's coming. I believe that with all my heart. That's my relentless optimism that
Yeah.
I believe that we will overcome this like every other challenge our nation's ever
Yeah,
faced.
I feel like we're on the uptick, right? We've had a tumultuous number of years, and you talk about, man, even going back to your books, right?
Yeah.
Normalizing these things, right? So how powerful it is just to say to an officer, "Hey, you used deadly force. You slept really well. You felt good to be alive. No guilt, no shame in that. Good, that's normal, right?" Or, "Hey,
Yes.
you took a human life. You're dealing with moral injury. I'm going to try to support you with some data and some anecdotes, but give yourself grace, right? That's very normal for you to kind of contend with these things, right? Again, that's a
Yeah.
normal response. And what I constantly say from the peer support angle is we have such an abnormal set of circumstances we're dealing with. And so everything that you may encounter is a normal response. But just to put literature to it, right? Put vocabulary to it to help us process and share. I mean, that's so crucial. But really at the crux of everything you said in the last few topics, as I'm underlining this need for support, right? You're talking about financial support. And yes, you're correct. Absolutely. And most cops would echo, they didn't get into the job to be rich, but you get what you pay for, right? And if you want sharp individuals, if you want tenacious individuals, if you want people with empathy and that want to
Uh,
do a job that's not well supported in other ways, and it's
yes.
really hard and is really litigious and is really high stress and dangerous, then you should pay, right? Like it's simple economics. And so I think that's a mindful conversation. But at the same time, even to the cop haters, right? If you want someone of the utmost quality, do you not agree that this is a very high stakes job with high stakes implications for mistakes, all those things? Most people would say, yeah, I want a professional cop. It's like, cool. Well, you got to pay
Yeah.
for it.
Amen. And that kind of brings us back to, you're talking about these biological responses and normalizing things. There's inside the autonomic nervous system, right? The part is automatic. We can't necessarily control it. It breaks out to fight or flight. We all know about fight or flight. And then the parasympathetic backlash is called feed and breed. Now, if you
Mm,
think I'm making this up, do an online search for feed and breed. It's the most common term for the parasympathetic nervous system. So after fight and flight, the sympathetic nervous system, there's this powerful backlash to parasympathetic. We see it a lot with victims of violent crime, in which they go home and they seek sex. And it's just this this feed and breed biological response. And we've got crime victims who are frightened by this. I trained all of the Army's sexual harassment assault investigators and counselors.
yeah,
I told them after this traumatic event just happened to this person, they might be going home and they might be seeking that reassurance and that biological backlash, and they're seeking sex. And it does not necessarily indicate a pattern of promiscuity. It
sure.
can be a normal biological backlash. And I got to know that. I train our nation's largest fire department and many, many other fire and EMS services. And many of them talk about coming back from this exciting, stressful event and kind of embarrassed. Nobody would raise it, nobody would talk about it. But this biological backlash, Frank Herbert called it the universal drive to immortality through progeny in the face of death.
Hmm.
And yeah, it happens to cops too. And just recognize that it's a normal biological response and don't be troubled by it and make the best out of it. But wait until you're off duty. Wait
Yes,
until you're
please.
off duty. It'll
Yeah,
still be there, I promise.
yeah,
So they take that out of context. Oh, Grossman says you're going to have great sex if you kill somebody. Well, you know what's evil about that is not that they're attacking me because they haven't really succeeded, but somebody will have that normal biological response, the feed and breed backlash. and think there's something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
And what we got to do is take these normal human biological responses and normalize them.
Yes.
Now, fight or flight doesn't mean it's never an excuse. Yeah, the fight or flight hormones kicked in. I punched his lights out. I couldn't get down. We're not buying that. Oh, the feed and breed hormones kicked in. I couldn't. No, we're not buying that.
Mm-hmm.
But if we understand it, then we won't be blindsided by it, and we can deal with it appropriately. And wait till you're off duty; it'll still be there.
Yeah,
It's amazing, astounding how many first responders get in trouble every year for having sex on the job. And just like fight or flight, we take this thing, we bring it under conscious control, and we're not blindsided by it. And that becomes the goal of all of this, is normalizing those normal biological responses.
Yeah, and that's so huge, right? It's again, the gamut is huge, and an iconic, maybe easily digestible example is, hey, after a critical incident, after you've been in danger or you just struggled through, seeing horrific trauma on someone else, you may sleep 0 hours the next day. You may sleep 15, or you might sleep normal. And in any example, there's gonna be officers, guys and gals, that feel some guilt or some shame, like, man, I slept 15 hours, like, shouldn't this bother me? My buddy slept 2 hours. He's
Yeah.
talking about this. And so, yes, this is all normal in this, again, in the scope of really abnormal. But really, it's just, and I love it how these are all intertwined, right? We're talking about this public safety crisis. And yes, I do like to think that, and I do like to see some notions where it's coming up in certain areas, but certainly not in all, right? Because maybe the pay hasn't caught up and maybe the standards are still low and we're continuing to lower standards. What are your thoughts as far as that aspect, that we see in the nation still, where attrition is still really high, retention still really low, and we're lowering standards, so we're arguably getting a lower quality of officer coming in?
I tell people nationwide that I tell them, I just trained every sheriff in the state of Pennsylvania 2 weeks ago, and I tell them we must not lower the standards. Pre-pandemic, post Rodney King, we were waiving felonies to get people to be cops, and bad things happen. We all saw that tragic incident in Michigan where those cops just beat that kid to death. And those individuals were not properly selected. They were not properly trained. They were not properly led. And it is a complete breakdown of the process. And we cannot lower the standards. We are in, everything we do is caught on camera.
Yeah.
And we're in a zero defects environment. The airlines are in zero defects. They cannot crash a single plane. Oh, come on. We have 30,000 traffic deaths a year. We've got hundreds of thousands of traffic accidents every year. One airline crash a year is acceptable. No. Oh, one airline crash every 10 years. No. You cannot crash a single plane. We will investigate you. We will fine you. We might fire you and might put you in jail. That's what zero defects mean. We cannot afford to have a cop walk out that door and do something stupid. So what we got to do is this. What if a bad thing happens and there's no cop there? That happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Or if a bad thing happens and there's a bad cop there, very, very bad things happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Better no cop than a bad cop. We got to accept that. Better no cop than a bad cop. Oh, but we're low on troops. We got to never lower the standards. Hey, the haircut standards, the grooming standards, things change. Tattoos, times change.
Yeah.
You got asthma, the Army won't take you, we'll take you. But when it comes to things like moral and ethical failure, we've got to draw a solid line, and we've got to police our own and police ourselves and get those people out of this business as quick as we can.
Yeah, well said.
And we got to police our own. But here's the wild card in the equation. Here's the heart of the matter. We talk about identify the things you can control and do them. And starting tonight, we are in the middle of a global epidemic of sleep deprivation.
Mm-hmm.
It impacts every aspect of our civilization. This global epidemic of sleep deprivation it's just horrendous. And it is the video games, it is the movies. The head of Netflix said their competitor is sleep. The corporate policy of Netflix is to steal your sleep.
Yeah.
Now, here's the key.
It says a lot.
Sleep deprivation is a key factor in suicide. You want to reduce law enforcement suicides? The first place to go to is sleep. One of the best meta-studies on suicide says not only is sleep deprivation a key factor in suicide, it's the most remediable factor. We can't do much about your relationship right now. We can't do much about your finances right now. But we can, by golly, get you a good night's sleep right now. So sleep deprivation is a huge factor in explosion of suicides worldwide. It's a huge factor in traffic deaths exploding worldwide. decade after decade, we brought traffic deaths down. Airbags, seatbelts, medical technical. Now worldwide, traffic deaths have exploded. What's the two major killers of our cops? Suicide and traffic deaths. And if we gave a damn about that, the first thing we'd home in on is sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is a key factor, and this is wild, but I can show you the data. A key factor in the opiate epidemic. You see, sleep deprivation creates chronic pain, and why opiates? Why are opiates a drug of choice? Why not crack? Why fentanyl? Well, sleep deprivation creates chronic pain, and an opiate. When you're in pain, your receptors are extra receptive to that. Doc, I heard all the time. Why are prescription opiates suddenly off the chart? What's the new factor? A great book I recommend to every cop is Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker, international bestseller. He nails a lot of this data, and online he's got a website where he continues to track the data. Everything I'm telling you, sleep deprivation is a huge factor in Alzheimer's. People say, "Oh, well, I'll sleep when I'm dead." You have a decade of Alzheimer's first, you idiot.
Yeah,
Sleep
and you'll die
deprivation.
sooner. Yeah.
So here's the key: as leaders, we must not put sleep-deprived people out on the street. Better no cop than a bad cop. Better no cop than a tired cop. Look, I'm on airlines 200 nights a year. If they don't have a rested pilot and the flight attendant and the guy that works on the plane are required to get enough sleep, and if they don't have a rested crew, they will cancel the flight. I'm good with that. Better no pilot than a tired pilot. Better no cop than a tired cop.
Absolutely.
And the single most irresponsible thing we're doing is rotating shifts. The data is overwhelming. Every time you rotate shifts, you give everybody jet lag. There is nothing you could do to destroy the performance of your people like rotating shifts. You need as much shift stability as possible. And we're killing people. Rotating shifts takes years off people's lives. It destroys families. The data is overwhelming. But the other thing is, what can you control tonight, police officer? Number one, sleep in the dark. Our bodies are designed to sleep in total darkness. I'm a huge science geek. My favorite website, ScienceDaily.com. Check it every day, every category. Major study in the sleep lab, totally dark room. Bathroom light is on and the door is shut. The light coming under the crack of the bathroom door is enough light to stop your body from producing the melatonin that you need. So the answer really is totally dark room, but that's hard to do without spray painting the windows black. And my wife frowns on spray painting the windows black. So is the old sleep mask. This sleep mask on Amazon has 85,000 five-star reviews for a stinking sleep mask. But once you wear that thing, it'll rock your world. My grandson goes off to college. What's going to kill him? Suicide, traffic deaths, and opiate overdoses. That's the three greatest threats. What's the best gift I can give my grandson? A good night's sleep. He's seen my class. He's heard my class. He's helped me out. He's off in college. I said, hey, how you doing, buddy? Great, Grandpa. He said, are you getting enough sleep? Yes, sir. Are you in your sleep mask? Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, he got Brody, went online, ordered another one. I sent him off to college with several different sleep masks. Said, find the one you like and use it. So it's starting tonight. Make that room as dark as possible. Go online. Order the sleep. My wife likes one. My grandson likes another. I like that one. It's made by Imzu, but it's the most popular mask on Amazon, and it's the best investment you'll ever make. Number one. Number two, cut off caffeine shortly after lunch. We're in the middle of a global epidemic of caffeine abuse. Mega doses of caffeine, terribly counterproductive. Just go home. Everybody listening, do two things. Order a sleep mask. Sleep in total darkness. Find the one you like. Cut off caffeine shortly after lunch, and you will rock your world. And these are things you can control.
Yeah.
You know, Eric, we kind of started the presentation with those threats that I've been receiving. Our cops get it all the time. So we get these nasty grams from these people. You're the bitch that's teaching cops killology, and we're going to rape your dog and kill your family and all that other stuff. Now, I can't control those idiots say. The only thing I can control is how I choose to respond. And if that bothers me, then they win. I'm not going to let them win. So I get some candy that I get a couple boxes at Christmas, a couple of boxes my birthday, I get one of those nasty grams. I get a piece of candy. I look forward to it. Yeah, you can always see them. You evil bastard. We tell how evil you are. And you get a chocolate-covered cherry. So look, who wins now? See, to paraphrase Viktor Frankl, life is a big game. And if you lose your temper, you lose the game. If you lose your temper, you lose the game. It's the only thing in the universe you can control. So here's what I tell my cops. I like Tootsie Rolls. Find whatever you want. Tootsie Rolls, individually wrapped. They're good in the heat. They're good in the cold. They remind me of Halloween
I'm gonna have
candy.
to disagree respectfully, sir. I think
Yeah,
they're
but
an atrocious candy.
have that little bag of Tootsie Rolls
Yeah.
in the dash of your car. And anytime anybody gives you the finger, you get a Tootsie Roll.
Hmm.
Anybody disrespect you, get a Tootsie Roll. So like you, I had a
You're
cop
gonna
say,
give some cops diabetes, sir.
no. It's
But
funny
hey,
you say
yeah,
that. Now, here's what happened.
eat
A
your
cop
Tootsie
told me,
Roll and yeah, do some
he said, I'd be fat in a week. He
yeah,
said, I'd
do
be pounding down bags. He says, I use Smarties.
hmm,
Yeah, I get one little chill pill,
hmm,
pop it in my mouth. I get the finger, I get a Smartie. Pop that little thing in my mouth. I think that's smart. I think that's a whole lot better than pounded down Tootsie Rolls. But the point is, this biological dynamic of taking what was meant to harm you and turning it into something good, that's straight up cognitive behavioral therapy. And take those things, whatever it is you want to do that was meant to be harmful, and associate it with something positive.
hmm,
If not Tootsie Rolls, if not Smarties, find something you do like, maybe maybe some beef jerky or whatever you think is better for wellness. But I think just that little Smartie, that little chill pill is not so bad.
yeah,
Before we worry about wellness on that Tootsie Roll, the Smartie, all those energy drinks are
hmm,
straightforward. The military has been at war now for 23 years. And we're still in Iraq, many other places around the globe. And for the first 15 years, the U.S. Armed Forces passed out those energy drinks like water. They gave them out by the pallet. We gave them to the troops. Aren't we nice guys? Then about 7 years ago, two major DOD studies, both with the same conclusion. Those energy drinks are condensed poison.
hmm,
In an academic environment, the one taking the most energy drinks were the ones most likely to fail out. The energy drinks were one of the greatest predictors of academic failure.
wow,
In a tactical environment, the one drinking the most energy drinks were the ones most likely to nod off on the job. Those energy drinks were one of the single greatest predictor of tactical failure and nodding off on the job. All there is in that is a mega dose of caffeine and sugar and some stuff to make you metabolize it quickly. It would be good before an athletic event, before a PT test, but then you crash.
yep,
And the second one feels good for 10 minutes, third one feels good for 5 minutes. All you're doing is building up your addiction and tolerance
yeah,
to
your
caffeine.
tolerance
So
crazy. Yeah, sir. I want to go back and you've covered a lot of really helpful nuggets, right? So rotating sleep schedules. I imagine you're talking about when someone works a shift or a week and they work day shift 2 days and then they work graveyard 2 days.
that's
Yeah,
just so
like, and I
the
did,
research is
you know,
overwhelming.
we didn't do that. I know agencies that do that, and really feel bad for that, right? And I'm like,
Yeah,
hey, there has
yeah.
to be some leading up. There has to be some
Oh,
sharing of information because
oh,
there's absolutely no reason for it. Like there's,
yeah,
and they're like, well, fairness. Well, fairness. Why don't you trade off every 6 months, right? And that way, you know, we have a lot of senior officers that love graveyard. It works better for their schedule, their families, and they actually are usually the ones that can sleep decently during the day, and then they switch to more like a swing schedule
yeah,
on days off. Like
yeah.
I never was able to do that, so I switched back and forth on my days off, which exacerbated my sleep issues,
Mm.
which had me over caffeinating. I tell this story where I was
Oh,
drinking coffee, black coffee on the way
oh,
home, but
ah,
like starting to doze off on the way
ah.
home in a marked car, right? So
Yeah.
that's informed my leadership decision to tell my people, hey, if you're tired, I want you to tell your sarge, and I tell my sergeants, hey, I want you to be supportive. Like a rested cop is better than no cop, right? A cop turning the radio off for 20 minutes to zen out and close their eyes or what have you is better than a cop running off the road, killing themselves, going in head on, right? Like,
I've done a lot of work teaching departments across America, and NYPD is hurting bad. But I talked to I had a conference there in New York City with postal police and a lot of other people and NYPD. A lot of people made the move from NYPD to postal police. And all of them said, the thing I miss? He said, every precinct had a room where you could crash
mm-hmm,
for 20, 30 minutes if you needed it.
it's
He said, on
huge.
this job, he said, I'm postal police. They catch you asleep, they fire you right now. NYPD, they said, look, we know you're working hard. We got a place for you, a dark, quiet place for you to crash. And they said, I miss it so bad. It's one of the best things. NYPD's got a million things going wrong, literally millions of citizens, and a large portion of them going wrong, but they were doing some things right.
Yeah.
And
No
that's
more
one of them.
beards though.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
times change. So, just getting ate up about wearing your hat or no beards
Yeah.
or tattoos. Those are minor things. Let them go
Yeah.
one way
Let's
or
go
the
for
other, however
values,
they
right?
want.
Why
Yeah.
not character, integrity, these non-negotiables, empathy,
Boom.
right?
Yes.
You
Yes.
can't yeah.
And sleep. Don't forget sleep. That is a non-negotiable.
Yeah, and we can
And
support that.
effective sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are things we can start right now. But just kind of tie it up. We talked about, and hear this verse again. Greater love has no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friends. But there are many ways to lay down your life. There are many ways to lay down your life. And sometimes the greatest love is not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice.
Mm.
To walk out the door every day of your life, to do a dirty, dangerous, thankless job to the utmost of your ability, because if nobody did it, our civilization would no longer survive. Not to sacrifice your life, but to live a life of sacrifice. For most of us, therein lies the greatest love.
That's the mic drop moment, sir.
Mm.
I'm curious, you are, as you pointed out, you're not slowing down. You keep cruising, you're doing trainings, you're going to Ukraine, for goodness sakes, in a couple months. I'm curious, what are some of your non-negotiable daily routines? We are talking about a little bit,
Yeah,
before the
yeah.
recording started, but for all the folks that are like, man, I want to be high functioning, live my best life, post retirement, and I think you're a great model example of that. What are some things that you found that have helped you de-stress, which is absolutely integrated with proper sleep, which is absolutely integrated with, emotional regulation and control, all these things?
One of my non-negotiables is every night. My bride of 48 years, my high school sweetheart, I proposed to her over 50 years ago, and every night we put our heads together and we pray for each other.
Hmm.
And when I'm on the road, I call her. And if I can't call her, then I send her a text message, says, or an email, I prayed for you. And she says, I'm holding you up in prayer. And when you come right down to it, no matter how angry you are, how frustrated you are, when you take just a minute and you pray for the most special person in your life and you hold them up, it puts everything else in
Hmm.
perspective.
Yeah.
And when you together pray for your children and pray for your grandchildren, it puts everything in perspective. The Bible says, wherever two or three are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst. So your prayers have power, but if you have a prayer partner, it has extra mojo. That's just me. There are times when I honestly, I'm 67 years old. I'll fly to a place. The connecting flight is shut down because of weather. I'll get a rental car. I'll drive all night long. I roll out. I present my class, get on a plane and fly home. But as soon as I get the chance, I catch up on sleep. And I keep track of my sleep like a miser. And one of the things that helps, and it's another non-negotiable, is as we get older, the body produces less melatonin. The melatonin is a hormone our body creates in the dark to allow us to sleep. So the one thing that I have done is start with an absolute baby dose, the smallest dose you can find. A little bit goes a long way. And a little bit of melatonin helps, as far as I'm concerned, to get that quality sleep and that prayer dynamic. But when I get a chance, I catch up on my sleep. I keep track of my sleep. I tell my cops, if I could give you one gift, I'd give you all a fitness tracker and allow you to start tracking your sleep. So we had a cop in Utah sent me an email. I'm in touch with him. He was one of my hosts, and he said he went online. He got a sleep mask, and he's tracking his sleep on his fitness tracker now. He's got a sleep mask overnight from Amazon. He sent me an email. Oh, wow, I had 5 hours of incredible quality sleep. I said, dude, it's the first night your body's creating that melatonin that will be there for the second night.
Hmm.
Wait for the second night, see what happens. Yeah, dude, he said, I had
Interesting.
9 hours of
Yeah.
sleep last night. And the melatonin and the sleep mask was a new factor that made that possible. Just one little thing you can do. Non-negotiable for me is get as much, keep track of my sleep and always wear that sleep mask.
Hmm.
Even if it's a short little nap in somebody's car. I pull that sleep mask off. Marine Corps picks me up at Palm Springs. I get a long ride to 29 Palms Marine Base. I'm in
Yeah.
this car, zoned out. I put my little sleep mask. I got my little inflatable pillow. I carry an air mattress and a sleeping bag, actually a little Gore-Tex Bivy sack.
Yeah.
Air mattress, inflatable pillow, Gore-Tex Bivy sack.
I love
And
it. I love it.
67 years old. Every other month or so, I spend a night in the airport. Flight's canceled. Next flight is out at 6 in the morning. If I left, drove to a hotel, came back, went through security, got to my flight, I wouldn't sleep at all.
Hmm.
I roll out my little Vivi sack, my little inflatable air mattress, it takes up minimal room. I crash. So the non-negotiable is that prayer with my spouse, my faith, and that trying to get my sleep as good as humanly possible. And going without sleep, there's nothing macho, there's nothing tough about going without sleep. Any kid in a slumber party can do it.
Hmm.
But you got to
But even
realize
they're
you've done
not
it for
good the
that.
next day. They're
Yeah,
moody. Like
they
I was
are.
that kid. Yeah,
They're
I was a
hypocrites.
wreck. Yeah.
So pace yourself for the long game. Get to sleep when you can. Really, I live my life in condition yellow. When I'm traveling, I can't always carry a gun, but I always carry a blade. I pull my baggage out that's got my books in it, and the first thing I do is pull out my blade. And while everybody's standing there waiting for baggage, I'm the one with my back to the pillar,
Mm-hmm.
just watching the cart go around and step forward and get my bag when it comes out.
Yeah.
It takes no more energy. It takes no more time just to live your life in condition yellow and walk what I call the hero's path. To walk the hero's path, live your life in condition yellow, and have your faith right, have your health right. That comes down to getting that sleep
Mm-hmm.
and managing your sleep and being a miser and getting that sleep when you need it to catch up. And those are tools that we can apply right now. That have worked for me. 67 years old, going 100 miles an hour, still on top of my game. And so far, so good. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I'm going to inject a couple things. You held up the mask for me, but for the listeners, it's there's so many sleep masks, but what I noticed was it's the one that has the indentations, right? Because some people are like, "Hey, if you do a sleep mask and it's flush on your eyes like a traditional
Yeah.
one, then your
Yeah.
eyelashes during, REM sleep
Yeah.
might flutter and wake you up." So yeah, there's these caverns
And it's funny,
basically
my
where you're
grandson and
Yeah.
my grandson and my wife, they both like the one that doesn't have that.
Okay.
And so, this works for my grandson, works for my wife.
Yep.
I tell you, you are 100% correct. You're far better off with the one that's got that indent back there.
Yeah, so check it
So
out.
that the
Try
REM
things out.
sleep and the
Yeah.
eye fluttering,
Yeah, those are
absolutely
super
correct.
cheap, right? Like you can get one for like $13 for,
Yes.
tons for less than 30 or $40.
Yeah.
And that is sleep should be considered priceless, right? So
And
chilly room, all
the
that stuff.
military passes out the sleep masks by fistfuls, but they're the
Oh, that's
cheap
great.
ones.
Yeah.
Just
Better than nothing.
people like
Yeah.
the cheap one, but spend $15-20 and get a good one.
Mhm.
It's the best investment you will make for wellness. I really believe that. And
Yeah.
that fitness tracker to track your sleep, get good quality sleep. It's the one thing you can control starting tonight. Cut off caffeine shortly after lunch.
I love
People
that. I
go,
do that.
caffeine doesn't bother my sleep. Yes, it
Mhm.
does. Caffeine doesn't make you not sleep. It makes it easier to stay awake and harder to have quality sleep.
Mhm.
Caffeine's giving you bad quality sleep. Protect your sleep. It's a little vacation that waits at the end of every day.
Mhm. Yeah, and there's another thing, with and you mentioned essentially I'll even call it like a micro dose of melatonin. Like
Yeah.
some people are going to get really excited. Okay, cool, I'm going to go buy melatonin. Hey, when you buy it at the store, right, it's probably 5 to 10 milligrams. But LT Colonel Grossman is probably saying is like, hey, he's talking about traveling overseas or changing time zones, and
Yeah.
you can get a pill cutter or you can just take a sharp knife and just crush that thing into quarters. Just start small, right, and try
Yes.
magnesium, right? Like Andrew
Yeah.
Huberman has a
Oh,
ton of
I
stuff.
take magnesium every night.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
one of the supplements. It's a good way to begin. You bet.
yeah.
Yeah, that
Love that, sir.
combination of magnesium and little that 2 milligram is what I've built up to over time. Initially, I was taking 0.5 milligram. I hit a point where as the years go by, as you get older, the body produces less. But I'm still making at 2 milligrams, which is a really really small dose and not necessarily that easy to find. You
Yeah.
go to Amazon and order it, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a good one. But like you said, keep it to a minimum. Don't just start with that minor dose, and then track it on your fitness tracker,
Mm-hmm.
and see if it's working or not. If it's not doing any good, stop it. If it does do good, then good. Just monitor your wellness and listen to all the things that are out there that we can be doing to improve our wellness.
Yeah, I love that, sir. We've covered so much ground, but one thing I do want to ask you because I'm a firm belief that if people are consuming media like this long
Oh,
form, where we're going deep into law enforcement culture, how do we turn towards a better tomorrow? I have strong belief that a lot of our most responsible leaders and future leaders are listening to these kinds of conversations. What would you say to those future leaders that maybe for a while they have to lead up or try their best to navigate the storm and wait for some people that might not be as invested to having those hard conversations with politicians, with the public of what cops really need right now? What do you say to them in all these topics as we talk about
uh,
support and the
uh,
job and resilience?
All right. Well, number one is this, and I often begin a podcast with this. We're in the middle of this podcast revolution, and there's a lot of bad stuff happening out there right now, but there's some good stuff, and this is one of them. When I was a kid, there'd be 2 or 3 networks. You had to move the TV antennas to get to them. There'd be one newspaper in every town, and maybe maybe 6 national magazines. And if you wanted to have an impact, that's all there was. And then we broke that logjam of information with the podcast revolution. Back in the day, 26 years ago, I was on 60 Minutes. I was on 2020, back when it really meant something. But it was nothing. You had a 5-minute soundbite. You couldn't control what was being said.
Yeah.
And it was nothing. Today, we have these podcasts. And I believe those who are creating the podcasts represent one of the most positive and influential and good things happening. And better yet, those who are listening to the podcast, those who want deeper information, who want to dive in deeper, they represent our best hope for the future. All you listening right now, you're doing the right thing. You're on the right path. Listen what Eric's got to say. Maybe find something I said that was of value. Take notes, write it down. Think how you can apply it and strive to be that better leader and maybe be that better trainer. When we talk about controlling your temper, I spent some time talking about that. And it's kind of one of my non-negotiables. There is never, ever a good time to lose your temper.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm ashamed of some of the things I did as a father. As a grandfather, I had a chance to do a better job. But the first step is understanding nobody respects your temper tantrum. Nobody respects your temper tantrum. They respect your calm. If the day-to-day pissant things make you lose your cool, then when things are going to hell and people are dying, you don't have a prayer. But who are you going to lean on in your time of need? Who are you going to look to? The people listening to this podcast, the people seeking deeper levels of knowledge. It's a beautiful and positive thing, and it should leave us with hope for the future. To listen to these and then to turn around, make the next step, and apply it to your life to the utmost of your ability.
Such a powerful thing. We talk about something like a temper tantrum, whether it's being a parent, and we've all had those moments. Like I had one last week, right? But the humility to reflect, hey, I am demonstrating leadership, and that's not how I want to lead this family. That's not how I want to lead my community. You are a leader by virtue of your job. If you're listening, you are a figure that people look to in times of need. So even if it's your interpersonal relationships at work, maybe you saw it modeled and subconsciously you're like, hey, a strong police leader is someone that raises their voice. Well, no, it's not, because it doesn't resonate with you, right? And so, man, what a reflection point. And everything that we talked about, I think, could be connected directly to service and legacy, right? Like that's a theme that's been kind of, it's like if there's a little light board ringing in my head whenever you were going through the last almost hour that you spent with us, it's legacy, 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 right? What do you want your legacy to be? And when other people left, thank you for your time. And whether it's 2 years in the service or 20, legacy, like what do you carry with you? And I really appreciate all this time and the expansive knowledge you shared with us. Lieutenant Colonel, what else is on the docket? You're going to Ukraine this spring, but what else is on the docket, for you moving forward? And, I don't get the sense that you're slowing down.
No, I got a couple of books. We had some books. Just my book came out last summer, was on hunting. I believe that the activity that makes you most prepared for combat is hunting. You can't understand combat, can't understand killing without understanding hunting. So that came out, and we're trying to find places where we can let people understand that. But it's a terribly important part of the equation. On combat, on killing, on hunting, they all weave together. On January 1st, my book on spiritual warfare came out. Also last year, we had the Bulletproof Mind Companion book. It came out, but we're in kind of a lull now. The next book in the pipeline is probably about 2 years away. It's called On Sleep: The Tragic Impact of a Global Epidemic of Sleep Deprivation. Got a couple other books that are bubbling along, and I need to do a next edition of On Combat. There's so much we've learned since that book came out to make it a better. Really, my greatest legacy will be On Combat. So many people said, On Killing's a great book, but On Combat's what it's all about. And how much I've just so many times people say this book saved my life.
Mm.
The stuff in this book saved my life.
Yep.
When I know I can make it even better, there's this real motivation. But first and foremost, what I love to do is presenting. Writing's hard work. Talking and presenting is fun. It's what we do. It's what we rejoice in as human beings. And my hearing. I'll give you an idea of how my life has changed. I'm a huge fan of service dogs. I haven't. I have.
Yeah.
We talked about suicide. I lost a brother and two nephews to suicide. But only one of them was an Afghanistan vet. And I believe with all my heart, if my nephew had had a service dog, he not just wouldn't, but couldn't have taken his life. We hear that over and over again. I couldn't do that to my dog. And the idea of a service dog, first and foremost, you're never ever alone. You go to the bathroom with them, you go outside with them every day. They get you up in the morning, and we're not meant to be alone. Dogs are pack animals.
Yep.
You leave one dog alone at home, it's solitary confinement. They're literally you got two dogs, leave them alone at home, they're good to go. Well, with all that said, we're the same way. We're pack animals. Here's what's happened. My hearing is going out. I set 3 alarms, and I'm afraid to death I'll sleep through them. You can't sleep with the hearing aids on. So I've got a service dog, a little 7-pound, not quite 1-year-old poodle called Charlie. And I'm just starting to travel with him. And he wakes me up when the alarm goes off in the morning.
Very cool.
He wakes me up if somebody's knocking on the door. And little Charlie is going to make it possible for me to keep doing what I do for another 15 years. He's got about 15 years of good life in front of him. And I identified the problem, but not only the hearing, but I've spent 26 years on the road, 200 days a year, alone in hotel rooms. And that's not good. I'm okay. I'm driving on, but I like having my little buddy with me.
Yeah.
I like having that guy with me. And that's maybe one of the greatest changes. If you see me it's going to take time to get Charlie fully trained up. You see me in a presentation in the near future, you'll see Charlie. Now, here's the key. Most service dogs cost $20,000, $30,000. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with selling that. Nothing wrong with buying that. But that's a Rolex. My nephew needed a Timex. And Charlie's a Timex. Charlie didn't cost $20,000.
I love a Timex. I literally have an actual Timex, yeah.
Charlie cost about $1,000 to get from a nice breeder. And we trained him ourselves. We did everything we need to. And Charlie's a Timex. And we need a lot more Timexes and Rolexes out there. So the idea of a service dog, just find a good dog. Train them well. Don't let them embarrass you. Put that vest on them, and you're never alone. And take them everywhere. And you were a canine officer. You know what it felt like to have that dog with you 24/7.
Yeah.
One of the greatest feelings on the planet, to have your buddy with you all the time. And you can have that. And when it comes time to look down the barrel of a gun and say, I couldn't do that to my dog. And those are good things we can do. And so one of the biggest changes of my life, you brought it up, I haven't really thought of it, came out of nowhere, was a little Charlie on the road. You see me in the next couple of years. I'll probably introduce Charlie in the first little bit and put him in somebody's lap and
yeah, nice. Yeah. I'm excited to see Charlie Grossman Instagram go viral. Little cute little pup.
Right.
Well, thank you again so much, Lieutenant Colonel. It's kind of surreal, for me to meet and be able to spend this time with someone that was a figure for so much law enforcement and really impactful. Again, just knowledge base that helps us all be healthy and pay attention to the important things to navigate our careers, but beyond that, our lives. Your book was one book that I bought immediately when I found out a buddy of mine's younger brother was going overseas to Afghanistan. And that was like, I need to get him on combat. That's like what I could control, right? I can't control what's happening to him over here. I can't control if he reads it. I know he did, but I said, hey man, I need you to read this and I'm feeling for you. I'll be thinking about you and just be safe, man.
All right.
But yeah, so thank you so much for spending the time with us. Is there anything else you want to leave us with?
Thank you, Commander. It's an honor.
Thanks,
Commander, Navy rank is the same as Lieutenant Colonel. And we're really wise. Lieutenant Colonel is just so awkward. We in the we go lieutenant, captain, and commander, and it's a good honorable rank to hold at a young age, doing amazing deeds. Thank you. You give me hope for the future, and all your listeners out there, thank you, and God bless you, and God bless America.
Thank you, sir. Amen. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.